Welcome to The Debate. Imagine a muddy Sunday league pitch. The center back makes this terrible blind pass, the opposition intercepts it, scores, and, the volunteer coach on the sideline just throws their hands up in complete despair.
Oh, yeah, we have all seen that exact moment.
Right, it happens every weekend. But what if I told you the solution to that completely amateur mistake was sitting in a billion-dollar server farm tracking Champions League data?
Which is, let's be honest, easily one of the most misunderstood intersections of high technology and grassroots application today.
Absolutely. So the central question we are tackling today is this. Does AI serve as a powerful new tool to help beginner and amateur coaches understand and apply simple tactical strategies? Or, conversely, do financial barriers and inherent data biases make AI a luxury that only benefits elite, top-tier teams?
And this is all stemming from recent analyses of modern football technology, right?
Exactly. It details how AI uses millions of raw data points to recognize patterns that dictate match strategy. So, to lay my cards on the table, I will argue that AI fundamentally democratizes football strategy, translating overwhelmingly complex data into simple, understandable patterns that beginner coaches can use to teach the game.
And I will argue that because these machine learning models are built on incredibly expensive technology and, crucially, exclusively trained on elite league data, their strategic insights represent a fundamental statistical mismatch. I mean, they are structurally inaccessible and, frankly, practically useless for amateur teams.
Okay, well, let's actually break down how this works mechanically first, just so we understand exactly what kind of data we are talking about here. Because we aren't just talking about a scout with a notepad anymore.
No, not at all.
Modern top-tier stadiums are rigged with high-definition optical tracking cameras. These systems capture the X and Y coordinates of all 22 players and the ball roughly 25 times every single second.
Right, plus the Z coordinate for the ball's height and wearable sensors measuring heart rate, acceleration, deceleration, all of it.
Exactly. It is literally millions of data points per match. To a human, that is just a giant spreadsheet of noise. But AI, specifically machine learning algorithms, it ingests that geometry and finds the narrative.
It organizes the chaos, essentially.
Precisely. The source material uses a really great baseline example. Imagine teaching a software model to recognize a goal celebration. You don't program it to look for a fist pump.
Right. You just feed it the data.
Yeah, you feed it thousands of videos of celebrations until it mathematically recognizes the visual pattern completely on its own. And AI does the exact same thing with tactical space. It examines huge amounts of match data and finds correlations humans simply cannot see in real time.
Okay, but
Just to finish the thought for a beginner coach or, a parent who just volunteered to manage an under-14 team, understanding spatial strategy is the hardest part of the job. But AI has distilled that chaos into straightforward tactical truths.
I come at it from a different way, because the problem with that assumption is that it ignores the actual mechanics of grassroots football. We really have to question this idea that elite data trickles down cleanly to an amateur pitch.
But why wouldn't it?
Well, the source material is explicit about the limitations here. First, there is the massive, obvious financial wall. Smaller clubs simply can't afford the cameras, the sensors, and the tracking systems required to generate their own team-specific data. It creates a huge gap.
Okay, I hear that, but that's exactly why the public-facing insights are so valuable. I look at it like medical science, right? You don't need an MRI machine in your local clinic to benefit from the medical textbooks that were written using MRI data.
That is,
Like when AI reveals that certain defensive movements consistently create attacking openings, amateur coaches can adapt that simple spatial concept for their weekend games without spending a single dime on the actual technology.
That's a compelling argument. But have you considered that theoretical knowledge divorced from team-specific data is actually unhelpful? The source material explicitly states that coaches use AI insights to decide who should start the game and which specific player to substitute.
Well, yes, at the elite level.
Right, but without the raw details, how fast a specific amateur player runs or where their individual passes go, the beginner coach isn't actually using AI strategy. They are just guessing based on television broadcasts, And the text notes those broadcasts are meant to make the game exciting for fans, not to serve as an actual coaching tool.
I think you're getting too bogged down in the hardware, though. Even without tracking their own players, the conceptual insights, which are broadcast globally now via heat maps and expected goals, they act as a free educational blueprint.
Let me stop you there, because the knowledge itself is flawed for this context. If you train an autonomous self-driving car entirely on the pristine, perfectly predictable curves of a Formula One track,
Okay.
and then you drop that exact same car into chaotic, pothole-filled downtown traffic, it is going to crash. It's a completely different environment. Machine learning systems learn exclusively from their training data. Because the vast majority of this football tracking data comes from top professional leagues, the tactical patterns the AI identifies are entirely optimized for elite athletes.
But the underlying geometry of the pitch doesn't change. A football pitch is a football pitch.
The geometry doesn't change, no, but the physics absolutely do. Let's look at a concrete example. The text states AI can predict which formations lead to more chances.
Right, which is hugely helpful for a beginner.
Is it? Let's say an AI analyzes 100,000 matches and concludes that a high-pressing 4-3-3 formation yields the highest attacking output. Why does it conclude that? Because it calculates the spatial geometry, assuming the forwards have the VO2 max to sprint relentlessly for 90 minutes.
Well,
It assumes the defensive line has the physical recovery speed to play 40 yards up the pitch and still catch a counterattacking striker.
which amateur players cannot do. I completely acknowledge that.
Right. So what happens when a beginner coach adopts that formation because the AI data says it's optimal? It triggers a structural collapse. The forwards press for 15 minutes and just exhaust themselves.
Yeah, they get tired.
And the amateur midfield doesn't push up because they are terrified of the space behind them. So the team stretches out to a 60-yard length, leaving massive gaps, and the opposition just chips the ball right through the middle. The text explicitly states, if most training data comes from top leagues, AI might not work well for players in lesser-known competitions.
I mean, sure, if applied poorly.
Taking elite optimized patterns and forcing them onto amateur players isn't education. It's a recipe for a tactical disaster.
Okay, but you are assuming the amateur coach is applying the AI's blueprint mindlessly, without any contextual translation. I am not denying that an amateur lacks the physical engine of a professional, but I am not convinced that this invalidates the AI's core insights.
How so?
Because the text also affirms the fundamental nature of the sport. It says, the human element, the skill, the emotion, the unpredictability remains the core of the game. The AI isn't replacing the coach's brain, it's giving them a structural ideal to work backward from.
How do you work backward from a model that assumes a passing accuracy your team fundamentally doesn't possess?
By understanding the human behavior that the model reveals. Let's dig into one of the specific examples the text uses for pattern recognition. It notes that AI can spot when a player tends to pass left under pressure.
Yes, I remember that part.
Let's think about why that happens. That is a biomechanical reality. Most players are right-footed. When they are pressed heavily from a specific angle under severe cognitive load, their body mechanics naturally default to opening their hips outward, which leads to a left-sided pass.
Okay.
That is a universal football truth. It applies to a multi-million-dollar midfielder in the Champions League, and it applies to a teenager playing in a local park.
I see where you're going with this, but
Let me just finish the thought, because this is key. When AI processes millions of tracking points to reveal these underlying human tendencies, it gives the beginner coach an incredibly simple tool. The coach doesn't need to ask their amateur players to run faster. They just tell their pressing forward, hey, when you close down their center back, force him to his weak side, because players tend to panic and pass left under pressure.
right.
That is a highly effective, very simple field strategy derived entirely from AI data, and it requires zero elite physical attributes to execute.
It requires zero elite attributes to attempt, sure, but whether it actually works brings us right back to the data mismatch. You mentioned extreme cognitive load and pressure.
I did.
How is the AI actually defining pressure in its algorithm?
It defines it by defender proximity and closing speed.
Exactly. Closing speed. When the AI model spots a player passing left under pressure, it is defining that pressure based on the closing speed of an elite athlete. An elite forward closes down a defender in, say, 1.2 seconds.
Yeah.
That specific violent speed is what triggers the cognitive panic response in the brain, forcing the hips to open and the leftward pass to happen.
And an amateur forward is slower.
Much slower. An amateur forward might close down that exact same defender in 3.5 seconds. Because the speed of the game is vastly reduced, the cognitive trigger never actually occurs. The amateur defender has an extra 2 seconds to process the space, adjust their feet, and comfortably pass to the right.
Well, they might still panic.
Maybe, but if the beginner coach is building their Sunday strategy on the AI's universal truth that players pass left under pressure, they are operating on a completely false premise. The nature of the pressure in their league is fundamentally different.
That is a fascinating breakdown of the variables, I'll admit. But aren't you essentially arguing that elite data has absolutely zero pedagogical value for grassroots football? That feels unnecessarily fatalistic.
It's not fatalistic. It's about algorithmic precision. Machine learning requires accurate context to make accurate predictions. If you feed an AI thousands of images of perfect pitches, perfectly spherical balls, and highly conditioned athletes, it builds the strategic model of a game that amateur players are not actually playing. Practically speaking, a grassroots match with muddy pitches and inconsistent touches is a statistically different sport.
But again, this is where the human coach comes in as the translator. The source material explicitly frames AI as a tool to help people understand. It doesn't say AI dictates the exact commands. Let's talk about expected goals, or XG.
Right. The metric heavily featured in television broadcasts.
Yes, and that is exactly my point. Before this AI integration, a volunteer coach relied entirely on, well, outdated dogma. They would yell at their players to shoot from anywhere.
True, we've all heard that from the sidelines. Exactly. Now, because AI has distilled the geometry of thousands of matches into an easily digestible metric like XG, that amateur coach intuitively understands that a 30-yard shot has like a 2% chance of scoring, while a cutback pass into the penalty area has a 35% chance.
Okay, but
The coach learns that simple field strategy through osmosis. They look at the ideal blueprint, they look at their amateur squad, and they scale it down. The conceptual education is still happening.
I hear you, but if the amateur coach has to manually scale down the insights, actively disregard the physical assumptions of the data, and adapt a theoretical concept to a muddy pitch, then they are no longer relying on the AI's tactical strategy.
They're using it as a foundation, though.
They are relying on their own human intuition, which entirely defeats the premise that the AI itself is guiding the amateur strategy.
I disagree. I mean, they wouldn't have the structural framework without the AI pointing out the inefficiency in the first place. The text highlights how AI helps referees organize video and focus on important frames to reduce mistakes, right?
Yes, it does say that.
Public-facing AI data does the exact same thing for the amateur coach's brain. It organizes the chaos of the game, focuses their attention on high-value areas of the pitch, and reduces their strategic mistakes.
You mentioned public-facing data and television broadcast again. We really need to be highly critical of what the text says about those tools. It notes that broadcasters use AI to create heat maps and expected goals overlays to make the game more understandable and exciting for casual viewers and fans.
Which spreads the tactical knowledge.
But the infrastructure of public-facing AI is designed for fan entertainment, not perspective coaching. It is designed to explain why a play mattered in retrospect, to validate a fan's emotional reaction. The text explicitly states that actual coaches use these insights to decide who should start the game and which specific player to substitute. That relies on microdata.
Meaning the individual tracking data of their specific players.
Precisely. To make micro decisions, you need microdata. Without knowing exactly how fast your specific right back accelerates or the exact completion percentage of your midfielder's forward passes, you cannot actually implement an AI-driven strategy. You are literally just guessing based on a Champions League heat map you saw on television.
But why does the amateur coach need microdata to teach macro concepts? I think you are setting an impossibly high standard for what constitutes using AI.
I don't think it's impossible. I think it's just accurate.
But look, if a heat map on a broadcast shows an amateur coach that elite teams consistently exploit the half spaces, the channels between the wing and the center, that coach can teach their youth players to start looking for those pockets of space. They don't need a wearable sensor on their 12-year-old midfielder to say, hey, stand in this gap here. The AI simply highlighted the gap.
Right, but identifying the gap is only 10% of the tactic. The other 90% is the biomechanical ability to receive a ball in that gap, turn, and distribute it before the defense closes in.
Well, obviously, skill plays a part.
Exactly. If you teach an amateur to stand in a high-value AI-identified zone, but they lack the first touch to control the ball in tight traffic, you haven't given them a good strategy. You've just orchestrated a turnover in a dangerous area.
Which is why the role of the coach remains central. And the text mentions that as we move into the future, we will see smarter wearables, warning of injury risks, and coaches using simulations to rehearse dozens of game scenarios.
Right.
The technology is only getting more integrated. If amateur coaches don't start learning how to read these spatial blueprints now, even in their broad, generalized forms, they will be completely left behind.
But that future integration you just mentioned actually proves my point about the widening gap.
How so?
Simulations require exact inputs to function. You cannot run a digital simulation of an amateur weekend game using elite physical inputs. The simulation will spit out tactical advice that is physically impossible for your team to execute. As the technology advances for those who have the capital to afford massive data collection, beginner and amateur coaches will be pushed further to the margins, left trying to build functional tactics out of, scraps of broadcast entertainment.
Well, we have definitely unpacked a massive amount of technical and practical theory today. So let's summarize where our perspectives land based on the material.
Sounds good.
I maintain my position that despite the undeniable financial barriers, AI serves as a powerful democratizing force for football strategy by capturing millions of raw data points and translating complex spatial geometry into simple, digestible heuristics like expected goals and passing tendencies. AI provides a free conceptual education. It organizes the chaos of the pitch, helping beginner coaches understand fundamental tactics and apply simple field strategies far more effectively than relying on outdated intuition.
And I firmly stand by my counter perspective. The source material outlines a reality defined by financial inequality and algorithmic specificity. Because machine learning models require precise context, and these systems are trained almost exclusively on elite professional data, their strategic insights are structurally optimized for elite physical realities.
Right.
Attempting to apply these high-speed, high-stamina patterns to amateur grassroots players isn't just ineffective. It actively misleads beginner coaches, pushing them to implement tactics that are fundamentally unsuited for the actual sport they are playing.
I think it is safe to say, though, we do share a point of convergence drawn directly from the text. AI is undeniably permanently shifting how the sport is analyzed. We both agree it possesses an unprecedented capacity to process information rapidly and identify structural patterns that the human eye simply cannot track in real time.
Oh, absolutely. The raw computational power to organize tracking data into a coherent map of the pitch is remarkable. Our core disagreement rests entirely on translation. Whether those highly specific, elite-level maps can be universally applied as simple strategy, or if they represent a fundamental statistical mismatch for amateur reality.
Precisely. And as we look toward the future, the text promises, with AI simulations and deeper integration of wearable tech, this tension between elite data modeling and grassroots application is only going to become more critical. It forces us to ask a vital question about the future of coaching education.
Very true.
As AI writes the new tactical blueprint for the game, are we handing amateur coaches a textbook they can read and adapt? Or are we handing them a textbook written for an entirely different species of athlete? It's a question that leaves us with a lot to consider as the integration of technology and human unpredictability continues to evolve.
It certainly is.
We leave it to the listener to decide for themselves how amateur strategy should adapt in the age of algorithms. Thank you for listening to The Debate.